All right, let's jump right into a really big question for today. Who should our heroes be? We're going to get into how we choose who to admire, what happens when our heroes aren't so perfect, and what it really means to become an example for other people. You've probably been there, right? You hear a new song, the beat is amazing, you can't get the melody out of your head, but then you actually listen to the words and yikes, they just don't line up with what you believe. Well, the source material we're looking at today starts with that exact feeling. Okay, so let's take that idea and apply it to people. We all have heroes, people we really look up to. But what do you do when you find out they have some pretty major flaws? Is it actually possible to just pick and choose to admire their talent or their bravery, but just ignore the other stuff? Can we really tune out the parts we don't like? To really dig into that question, we're going to look at a true story. And it's a pretty intense one. It's a story that pushes the whole idea of faith and conviction to its absolute limit. This isn't just a thought experiment. This is what actually happened when one man's beliefs came face to face with a firing squad. That's how old Bruce Olson was when he felt a calling, just 19 years old. And he acted on it, deciding to become a missionary in Colombia. He knew almost nothing about the country, but he went anyway, completely trusting that he was on the right path. For 28 years, that's a long time, Bruce worked with the Motilona tribe. But then, at age 47, his life was completely turned upside down. He was captured by communist guerrillas. They accused him of being a CIA agent and dragged him deep into the jungle. For 8 brutal months, he was held prisoner, beaten, and tortured. And it all ended with one final, terrifying sentence: execution by firing squad. But this is where the story takes a really incredible turn. As you can see, even through all that horror, Bruce's faith didn't just survive, it grew. He actually started to earn the trust of the men who captured him and began teaching them how to read, using the Bible as their textbook. He was so effective that his captors had to move him 12 different times just to keep him away from the other guards. But in the process, he shared his faith with about 200 of the very people holding him prisoner. Which brings us to this one, unbelievable moment. Tied to a tree, Bruce Olson is facing his executioners. But this isn't just a random group of soldiers. Among those 18 guerrillas raising their rifles were men he had become friends with, men he had taught, men who had even adopted his faith. They were actually crying because they were caught in this impossible choice. They knew they'd be killed too if they didn't follow orders. So what happens next? I want you to just hold that question for a minute, because Bruce Olson's story, the story of a courageous but still very human, very flawed person, is the perfect setup for the central idea in our source material. And this is where the source uses Bruce's story to pivot. It zooms out from the idea of a human hero to the concept of a perfect one. It uses this dramatic example to make a larger point about who we should ultimately be looking to as our guide. This slide really breaks down the core distinction the source material is making. On one hand, you have human heroes, like Bruce Olson, incredibly inspiring, no doubt, but still human, with that mix of good traits and, flaws. The source then contrasts this with the example of Jesus Christ, who is presented as a flawless role model, someone with no undesirable parts to try and tune out. So what does this example actually look like in practice? Well, according to the source, it's got nothing to do with power or personal comfort. It's a life that is completely defined by service. The idea is that he didn't come to be served, he came to serve others, to help them and to save them. And this principle of service is positioned as the absolute foundation of real heroism. Okay, so if service is the foundation, what are the building blocks? What are the specific qualities that define this kind of hero? Let's take a look at the character traits that our source points to. These qualities, which the source pulls from the Beatitudes, really paint a picture of heroism that's more about your inner world than your outer actions. It's less about grand public gestures and way more about the state of your character. The source is saying that true heroism is found in things like humility, compassion, making peace, having a deep desire to do what's right, and making sure your motives are pure. And the idea is that those internal qualities are meant to fuel external action. This isn't about just being a good person quietly in a corner. The source calls for us to actively, compassionately get involved in ministering to the whole person, addressing the full range of human needs, from physical and mental to social and spiritual. All right, and this is where the whole thing turns and points directly at you. After exploring the story of a hero and the qualities of a role model, the source makes it really clear that this isn't just something to sit back and admire from a distance. It's something to become. This is such a powerful way to reframe things. The message here is that you're not just supposed to be a follower of good examples, you're actually meant to be one. It's an invitation to step into the role of being a hero for someone else by living out these qualities in your own life. And your influence is probably way wider than you think. Yeah, you might immediately think of a younger sibling or a friend who you know looks up to you. But the source points out that it could even be an adult who sees something in your character, that reflection of a higher example, and is inspired by it. The point is, we're all setting an example, whether we realize it or not. And that leaves us with this final, really important question from the source material. It's not if you are an example, it's to whom. As for Bruce Olson, his would-be executioners lowered their guns. Their commander, hearing the chaos, came to see what was happening and was so amazed by the loyalty Bruce inspired that he released him. He lived. His story shows the incredible power of being a flawed but committed example. So the question for us is, who's watching? Who is learning from us? And what kind of hero are we choosing to be?